Hello there, and a warm welcome of sorts to this, the 261st edition of DF Direct Weekly, our weekly show where we discuss the latest gaming and technology news. Joining me, first of all, Alex Battaglia. Hello.
Yes, from a standing position. Surprise, surprise. But then maybe next week I'll be back on the treadmill. You never know. I'm varying things up.
That'd be good. Excellent stuff. And hello, Tom Morgan.
Hello, I am fully static this week, so no Doom guy head bobbing from me, but glad to be here.
Okay, brilliant stuff. But before we move on, quick shout out to the DF supporter program. Early access to every edition of DF Direct Weekly, high quality video downloads of everything we do, news updates from the team, completely ad-free access to digitalfoundry.net. Our website is pretty amazing stuff, so please do consider that, patreon.com/digitalfoundry. But let's move on to our first news topic. Okay, so first news topic of the week. This one came out of nowhere and from a surprising source. We were all set to talk about Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced as our lead story, but then Alex gained access to the GDC archive of talks from this year, and we found something that I think, Alex, it's quite extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah, it's hidden away in a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful presentation about F125's path tracing. It says F125 path tracing at 200 miles per hour. This was presented by Tom Hammersley of EA, Codemasters in this case, and it was all about the path tracing implementation in F125, specifically on PC. So there was a ton of really good information there, developed over 2 years. 1 year with two senior engine programmers, really fast. But the golden nugget was at the very end of the presentation when going over performance numbers. And he specifically references the RX 9070 XT as being surprisingly okay at the path tracing, like roughly 30 hertz at 4K FSR3 quality mode. And He said, like, basically, okay, well, can this run on lower end stuff? And then he cues up a video of path tracing running on the PlayStation 5 Pro. You heard me right. PS5 Pro running F1 with path tracing. And
amazing.
Basically when the PS5 Pro came out, we probably didn't think about path tracing being anything really viable for that console. RDNA 3, RDNA 4, they're better at RT, but not super impressive always. And this is running on there. So there's two things. He throws up a slide after he shows off this quick video showcasing it running. And basically, it's running internally at 1080p. It's being upscaled to 4K via PSSR. He doesn't say PSSR 1 or 2, but it really doesn't matter because they have a very similar frame time cost. Yeah. It's running a daylight track, which is kind of important. I'll talk about that later. And it's showing the original video that he just queued up was, he said 30 hertz, 30 FPS. So then this performance slide shows up, and we can see there's two columns. On the left is the game's standard path tracing implementation with, I would say, probably little like microcode optimization specifically tied to PS5 Pro architecture. It's just like a port from the PC version. And you can see that's running at 42.32 milliseconds. So that is actually quite a bit lower than 30 FPS. 20 FPS-ish region wouldn't be good enough for real-time rendering, at least at 1080p internal resolution. But next to that is what I presume the video is based on. He doesn't actually directly say it, but EAC is the research organization, engineering research organization within EA, and they do a whole bunch of crazy stuff like machine learning research, path tracing research. That's where Gibbs came from, their real-time GI solution they use in all their sports games. And here is a different path tracer where the total frame time cost is 23.36 milliseconds, which is a little bit above 40 FPS, which he said was good enough for a 30 hertz presentation, 30 FPS. He also made his mention as part of this, I'm talking about it here, but this prototype work, there was zero promises at all that this will be shipping. That's what we do. We always say things with big caveats at DF, and so do developers. And Yeah, so wasn't promised to be shipping in any version or any iteration of the game, although he does thank Mark Cerny at the end of the presentation. So I don't know. I kind of think this could be somewhere in the future, personally. But this is fantastic. There's a couple caveats, though, in spite of that. The EA Seed Orca one is running really fast, but he specifically mentions that they kind of want to work on their own path tracing implementation. That's what it kind of sounded like more. Like they want to optimize that first, and they want to do some other things with that to make it running better. And also another thing to mention is that the daylight tracks are a lot cheaper to render than the nighttime tracks in this game. And it's always been that way, especially like when you play, what is the one in the rain that you always do, Rich?
I don't know what you're talking about.
When you're benchmarking this game, you do something in
Monaco?
The rain.
Right. Okay. Yes. Monaco in the wet is the classic stress test, right?
Yeah. So like that has tons of lights. And one of the things that makes path tracing really expensive is when you get into many light scenarios. And that's when Reister starts getting a lot more expensive. So that is one aspect of the path tracing that is not represented here. And we would have to see if that were ever in a shipping product, if there would be large differences like we see on PC here. Another semi-caveat is that their original path tracer that they shipped on PC had a kind of Band-Aid solution to bring it out. At the end was for the secondary paths after the first one. So multi-bounce is actually handled by DDGI, which other path tracers like those found in like Cyberpunk or Indiana Jones, they use different types of radiance caches when they do them. And they usually do it after the multi-bounce is already like been to like 2 or 3. It's like the 4th bounce where they start going to the caches. So this is already like a lighter weight thing. Doesn't mean it doesn't look good or something like that, but it's already a bit of a lighter weight thing. So it's not like you can't just suddenly port Cyberpunk to the PlayStation 5 Pro or something like that here. As much as that would be cool, it doesn't work that way. But specifically for this game, they did show off path tracing running on the PlayStation 5 Pro.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty impressive. I'm intrigued by this, obviously, Alex, because you're quite right. Sony hasn't even mentioned path tracing as a potential use case for the PlayStation 5 Pro. It's obviously got enhanced ray tracing, as you said, compared to RDNA 2. But the concept that it's capable of path tracing is kind of like, we thought it was off the table, rightly so. And when you look at other RT implementations that we've seen on PS5 Pro, we've seen, with Alan Wake 2, for example, that they actually had to deliver what was essentially a lower than low version of ray tracing for PlayStation, but which makes this all the more interesting. Something that I find really interesting, in addition to what you've said, the computational cost of the EA Seed Orca coming in at 23.36 milliseconds. If you're at 30 hertz, you've got that's 33.3 milliseconds. So there's kind of like leeway here. Obviously, PSSR is going to take up some of that 10 millisecond headroom, so to speak. But I was thinking, a lot of the PlayStation 5 Pro games have been coming in at 864p, using PSSR with a 2.5x multiplier on each axis to get to 4K, right? That's 80% of 1080p. So that's another potential route forward there, depending on what the implications would be to image quality there, because upscaling ray tracing is a bit tricky, isn't it? But that is a potential option there. I really hope they ship it, right? I really hope they do something here. It would be a real statement. Certainly get a lot of interest back into Formula One 25, which is already like a really, really good PlayStation 5 Pro game that we highly recommend people check out. Kind of curious if they maybe might ship it in 26 instead, so they've got time to refine it. I don't know. So, Tom, what do you think?
Yeah, they're pretty fluid with these sort of rollouts. You could get away with, doing a patch update for the current version, and that'd be fine. I mean, yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, 30 FPS Formula One is an acquired taste, I'd say.
Yeah.
Fair point. Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely like up our alleyway, isn't it? We'd love to see this DF just to see how well it runs. And obviously the the breakdown of the buffer and how many milliseconds it takes to get a frame out with path tracing. I'm not familiar with the rest of the back end and how much else like lops on top of that. So 23.36. The one thing that stands out to me is like they've really made a huge saving. You know, their standard PT model on PC, it's the indirect paths part of it, which is they've cleaved off 17 milliseconds there to get with EA Seed's version of it, the Orca approach to it, which is amazing. I'm wondering how much, you know, we'd notice if we were to flip between the two and see indirect rays, like indirect bounces, degrade in quality. That could be very interesting to see. I'm so used to seeing like, oh, we've achieved this amazing thing, and then there's a voice in the back of my head that says, yes, but at what cost? And, you know, maybe it's so subtle that no one would really mind. So that'd be very interesting to see.
That's a really good question, Tom. And so one thing that also came out earlier this week was, I'm going to send this over to Oliver, was a paper from NVIDIA titled Reester PT Enhanced Algorithmic Advances for Faster and More Robust Reester Path Tracing. So for EA F1 25 on PC, they use Reester DI for the direct lighting, and they use Rieger, which is an AMD advancement for the indirect Reester implementation there, which like grounds it in world space with a voxel structure. Really cool stuff. But why I reference this NVIDIA paper is, which is a different type of technology, actually. It's not the stuff that ships in F1, but for much less performance, like half or even less, this paper shows that you can get even better quality using a similar technique, just with a lot more optimizations and better way to sample things. So one of the cool things like about that EA Orca Seed path tracer that they referenced there in the F1 presentation is that it could actually be even better quality than the original path tracing implementation, because
Interesting.
Yeah, Reester is really, really new technology. I think it's like 2020 was the first time it came out. And they just keep making advancements on it and how to sample it better, get the first initial samples in a cheaper way. It's like a very expensive technique in general. So every single time you cut down like half of one part of it, it actually has a very large millisecond frame time effect down the chain. So to say the least, who knows? The future is hyper accelerating. It just makes me more confident that something like PlayStation 6 could support at least 30 FPS PT titles, because if it's already running at 30 FPS on something like a PS5 Pro, obviously with a lot of caveats there, it makes it much more relevant for the future of PlayStation 6.
I think I'm a bit more optimistic than you, Ax. I think we could probably do 60 based on this and the advancements being made and the fact that RDNA 5 is basically built for this kind of thing. That's kind of like the point of it, really, which is really, really exciting, right? I guess there's still sort of plenty of latitude for running sort of rasterized versions at super high frame rates as well, if that's possible. But man, I'd love to see path tracing on a console, and it's kind of like been one of these things where you look at what the requirement is in the current generation for running, really good high fidelity path tracing, and you kind of think, well, maybe it's not going to happen for the next generation consoles. But then you sort of see the direction of travel, the amount of optimization that's going on, the changes being made, the focus on it. I think that's quite an interesting thing. The fact that EA Codemasters are seriously considering this and actually coming up with working implementations for PS5 Pro, no less. I think it's really, really exciting stuff. Was there anything else in the presentation not specific to PlayStation 5 Pro that caught your eye?
Well, they have a very different requirements than every other path trace game, I would say. Tom made mention of it with playing F1 at 30 FPS as being an acquired taste. And if you think about it, like, the amount of distance that an F1 car travels, both like in 33 milliseconds is a huge distance. That means you can get massive disocclusion or massive space difference between like the spatial coordinates in one frame to the next, and that makes doing path tracing even more challenging. And that's one of the reasons why, for their, at least according to Ham, that they did use DDGI for the secondary bounces, because it's a very stable structure as a car moves through it. So they basically were talking about how getting it to work at speed, both at 60 hertz as well as with cars moving so quickly, especially at those nighttime like Abu Dhabi at night, or Bahrain in the rain, as you've said, I think in the past, Rich.
Bahrain and Monaco.
Monaco.
We've done both.
I had to think about it. It's more challenging than other titles. And there was also a really interesting part about it, about the difference between NRD and ray reconstruction. Like NVIDIA's Relax denoiser or real-time denoiser is really good to start with, and because you can debug it really easily. But RR gives way better results, but it's harder to debug because it's a black box, and it picks up on all your mistakes, he said. Like, it always, if you make a mistake somewhere in your maths, like earlier in the pipeline, RR is going to show it like magnified 10 times because it just picks up on subtle correlations and, actually makes them look like something in the frame, whereas something like NRD would blur it over and you wouldn't see it. It's very interesting, that sort of difference to see. But hopefully presentations like this, which is, 2 engineers, less than 1 year's work, it shows that it is very doable, that it doesn't take much time, and the results were really amazing. Like, I really wish we had more time to cover F125 when it did came out. We kind of heard a little bit late that it was getting path tracing, and it was like with other titles, but I think it could have easily been a blowout video describing how it works. And I think if it's still going to be there in F126, presumably, right? Sure. So I think that's another thing to make sure we cover when the time comes.
It's very rare that the masters of code regress features from one to the next. So while I guess it hasn't been confirmed, I would be very, very surprised if they don't actually do it. Just one final question that I've got. You were talking about the 9070 XT. They were surprised by how well it performed on F125 there. And that was a 4K quality mode, so it would be like native 1440p. And were they talking about a performance target there, like 60 FPS or whatever?
Yeah, so at... it wasn't 60 FPS. It still didn't manage 60 FPS. It was like 33.5 milliseconds at Abu Dhabi at night, according to this year. So it was like running at less than half the speed of a 5090, but still less than half the speed at path tracing of a 5090 is actually a pretty good win for RDNA 4. You'd expect it to be worse. But the thing is, you're looking at apples and oranges here, because one of them's using ray reconstruction, which is a lot higher quality, and the other one's using NRD. And the PlayStation 5 Pro version was also running NRD. So the quality of a 1080p upscale could be questionable visually, depending upon what's going on. So that's another thing to talk about. Like, PS5 Pro, I think, also needs some sort of ray regeneration.
I'm pretty sure that's in the bag. Whether it's going to be PlayStation 5 or PlayStation 6 is up for debate. I was just raising the 9070 XT because obviously we've got figures here for the standard path tracer running on PlayStation 5 Pro. So obviously it's no 9070 XT, right? But,
no.
So it's quite interesting that you can get a sort of potentially a back of an envelope calculation on how much faster the 9070 XT is. But interesting nonetheless. And obviously when it comes to F1, the F1 franchise, really, Codemasters, they just sink in a lot of tech work. That PS5 Pro version that they put out was fully featured. I mean, they even had a shot at 8K mode.
Yeah, it was also 30, wasn't it? If I recall,
twas.
Was it?
If it was 60,
remember.
Amazing. Like, is that there? That
I can't remember that, but I think it might have been 30.
Yeah, it was. They're always right there at the forefront, aren't they? And I think the positioning would be good if they were there on the PS6 launch, because let's be honest, the PS5 Pro struggled for big bullet point things to advertise against, and to have a big push for PS5 6 with path tracing as a big, like, we need words to sell, big marketing terms to kind of get across what a new console's bringing in terms of value. So path tracing could be that, and maybe this could be one of those series and franchises which pushes it.
I could see it.
Yeah, I definitely want to see more there. They just go above and beyond, right? And they could, in theory, just let the franchise carry the sales, but they don't. They just push technology from one iteration to the next. I think it's pretty good. Okay, great stuff. Path tracing on PlayStation 5 Professional. Who would have believed it? I really do hope they ship it. Or just put it into F126 if needs be.
Do it. Do it now.
But let's move on. Okay, so this segment of DF Direct has been sponsored by LiberNovo, who sent me 2 of their LiberNovo Omni chairs to check out. So truth is, they actually approached us a while back, and I wasn't really sure what we could do about it because, DF and chairs, it's not really a natural collaboration, is it? But Alex, with all the things that you've gone through this year, the fact that I'm significantly older than you, so at this point, I've spent like 35 years doing desk work. And I've got to take this a bit more seriously, right? So yes, on a personal perspective, chairs, I'm looking into it. We did approach LiberNovo, that we have got a couple of their chairs. This one's the black one. There's also like a white one, a space grey one, which you'll see some B-rolls of. So I've seen the reviews of this chair, and there's a focus on ergonomics, right? And I've realised that all of the prior chairs I've had have been sort of gamer-orientated chairs, and they've been comfy. I've liked them. But there's always a sense that there's a support issue, like lumbar support in particular, sort of the lower back. It's been lacking, and after a long day, you sort of definitely feel it. So I've got the Omni in, right? And viewers might notice that I've been using the black version of this chair for a few weeks now. So I've got some thoughts. The space grey version, you'll see it in the B-roll because that was shot by our contributor, James Hills, at his studio. He's been working out, he's been helping us out rather a lot with a lot of logistical stuff behind the scenes. Just pointing out there, because the B-roll might suggest that I'm into DJing, but that's James, not me. There's all manner of stuff going on in his studio. Before we go on, though, I'm no ergonomic specialist, right, or a chair specialist even, and my experience is limited to the chairs you've seen on DF Direct over the years, but ergonomics is clearly important. So if you're thinking about changing your chair, purchasing a new one or whatever, I'd be looking at a variety of sources, expert opinion to figure out what's best for you, because I think in the long term, this stuff is actually quite important. So my time with the Omni, I'd say it's like a sort of really high-tech office chair with some interesting features. It's pretty cool. It's also the easiest chair I've built, right? I've got the optional footrest sent over. This one's super, super easy to build. Very, very few parts. Won't take you 5 minutes. Kind of looks a bit odd to begin with, but obviously it was an extension to a chair I hadn't yet built. And the chair takes more time to construct, maybe about 20 minutes in total, I think. When you open the box, there's this big guide sheet, and it's a fairly logical, methodical process. There's only 4 screws in total. They actually give you a screwdriver. Good. And which something made me chuckle, they give you some gloves.
Yes.
Constructing that.
What? Really?
That's awesome. Yeah. Kind of like almost sort of surgical gloves. It's quite funny. It's worth watching the YouTube guide for construction. First of all, you might have issues figuring out exactly where the screws should go. The video is definitely helpful there. And secondly, there's kind of like a loom of electronics, right? Cables. So the video kind of clues you in on where the wiring should sit when you're putting it all together. All pretty straightforward. My only critique, and it's kind of stupidly small stuff, that the guide talks about a small screw, and all the screws are the same length. It is of a different type, though. On a tangent, it's the first chair I've ever bought with a USB-C socket. But this is the interface that connects up the electronics to the rest of the chair. There's also a USB-C battery that powers the whole thing that slots in underneath there. Let's talk about the features here. And this is the sort of key thing that I think is interesting about this chair, and the concept of supporting your spine. They've got this thing called the Bionic Flex Fit for the backrest. And what they call dynamic support. So there's a lot of clever stuff going on, but ultimately the key thing that I wanted and got, I guess, was proper lumbar support at the base of my back. And the chairs I've used before have done it with like cushions, minor adjustments to the backrest, but this is kind of a lot more granular, which I think is a pretty good thing. It's two buttons rather on the chair for adjusting the shape of the backrest. There's like this really cool sort of adjustable piston on the back, which sort of gets you into the right positions there. You just reshape the backrest by using those buttons. It's really, really straightforward. That's the key feature from my perspective. That the headrest here is also pretty cool because you can take it out, you can put it in, you can adjust the height. There's also sort of lateral back to front movement, and I've never really felt sort of like I could use a headrest in the past because the shape of my spine is such that my head is forward. Yes, it's pretty cool stuff. The recline positions, now this is interesting because they're kind of positioning this as a chair that's for office work, but it does other things. So the initial position, 105 degrees, the deep focus mode, I would actually call this typical office chair angle mode, and that's pretty much what I use exclusively. There's 120 degrees, which sort of opens it up for a bit more sort of movement for your spine. It's okay, but I didn't really get on with it. And there's recline modes. So I don't relax in my office space, but there's 135 degrees and 160 degrees. So I think it's more for people that want to relax a bit in their offices or dens or whatever. And 160 degrees, well, just think about the angle on that. It was funny because I leaned back and thought I was going to fall over, fall back. But it does kind of work, and that's where you use your footrest.
Yeah.
So I think it's basically a pitch for relaxation there. And then there's Omni Stretch, and this is sort of a feature that's aimed at massaging the lumbar area. So you're kind of like, I guess the idea is you go into 160 degree mode, and then you press the button, and then the piston, it goes from like minimum to maximum in a sort of 5-minute duration. It's sort of aimed at, I'm just going to quote this, postural fatigue. It's aimed at reducing that postural fatigue. And it's best used with the footstool there. The B-roll here, I look a bit uncomfortable with it. I thought it might be a bit of a gimmick. I don't use the feature, but my wife actually had a go on it. She does have lower back problems and thought it was great. There's one more thing I want to point out here, because back when we were part of Corpo World with Reed exhibitions, we used to get guides. Do you remember we used to get guides through on how to sit at our desks in our chairs? And this has actually got pretty much the same guidance. And the thing that I discovered is that my desk is actually too low to get the proper sort of posture. So that's something I've got to sort out, and I can sort it out because my desk has got telescopic legs. So at some point I'm going to need to get that sorted. But the bottom line, I think, is that you buy a gaming chair for comfort, right? But this one, I guess it is comfortable, but it's more about ergonomics and proper support. There are some sort of things to point out. For example, 5-year warranty on the chair, but only 2 years warranty on the electronics. And basically, the electronics, everything that sets, the customization, it's everything that sets this chair apart from the prior ones I've had. So not having the similar 5-year warranty on that, I think it's a bit of a miss. They should probably address that. Obviously, this is a really expensive chair as well. These high-end ergonomic ones are a lot more expensive than your typical gamer chair, typical office chair. I've not tried other ergonomic chairs, so I can't really compare. But it is more comfortable. The customization for spinal position, good. Don't feel like I'm slouching in my chair anymore, which I think was the main thing I was worried about. There's no, this is a crazy one, but I kind of think it's cool. There's no egregious logos on the headrest.
This is it. This is the big one.
Yeah, so I've been kind of like, promoting, subconsciously promoting other chairs for the last few years.
Yeah.
But that's the feature lowdown of this particular one. I just want to say I'm not a chair or ergonomics expert, so I'd recommend on a topic as serious as this, reading a diversity of reviews when considering a purchase of this size. So, but with that said, please do check out the video description below with the links through to the various LiberNovo websites in various territories. Alex, chairs. You moved on to a standing desk. You're back in chairs now.
Well, I'm switching. So that's the one
You're
thing.
switching.
That's one thing I want to recommend to people in the audience is that you can't presume that a piece of technology will ensure your health forever or something like that. And you need activity in your life. You need variation. My physical therapist in German, makes more sense. But your back, your body is a movement apparatus. It is not meant for any sort of super extended single positions. And so you have to change up and vary your lifestyle to stay as healthy as possible. Something I didn't do for years, which is why I'm in the position I am in now. But I think it's great to invest in technologies like a desk and a chair that will make you healthier, but you have to then actively use the kind of diversity of positions and movement that these things should allow you. So if you have a standing desk, you go up and down with it. You change it up during the day. During the middle of this podcast, I changed where I was sitting and standing, right? Who knows? I'll break out the
treadmill.
5 minutes from now, you never know. But that's the whole point: is you have to keep moving. And so I'm very happy that we are actually starting to talk about this stuff on DF, even in the space of a sponsored segment, because everyone is sitting, everyone is viewing screens all day, but they are constantly neglecting what it does to their bodies. And this is one of the ways to actually start becoming active about it and thinking about it. And like Rich said, definitely do your research. Also, if you can, depending upon your country, talk with a health professional about what it'll bring to your life and what they also think about it.
And Tom, I met up with you last week, and we were talking about this. You're putting in your 10,000 steps in addition to everything else.
Yeah. So my issues are, it's not a severe by any means, but it's kind of an early warning call, I guess. Like it's that feeling of thinking, I don't really want to. Now I've got to stand up. This is going to hurt. I've got to really think about how to do this. That's a bad sign. So I've had, and it's because of all this sitting down, and it's not exclusive to Digital Foundry work or anything in the games industry. It's worldwide, all sorts of professions, and it's going to be And people do warn you in their later years. Be careful of your back, and I'm starting to see the early signs of those issues, I guess. So I've been putting in my 10K every day, and that's been really advice number one for a lot of these early signs of back pain that I've received. And 10K a day has really helped, and I imagine lumbar support on this would help massively as well, which I don't have. So
We'll have to figure that out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the thing, right? I mean, 35 years I've been in this game, and it is mostly desk work, right? And it's going to take a toll just because the amount of hours that you put in. So it's well worth considering that when you're considering your sort of workspace. It's all the more important bearing in mind that work from home is still a big deal, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah, for sure.
And obviously, as John famously put it, we're just a bunch of dudes working in our bedrooms. Okay, so in terms of ergonomics, that sort of thing, very, very important, but it is still just one part of the whole picture, and we're kind of figuring this all out for ourselves as well. But I guess with that, let's move on. Okay, so this week we saw the announcement of Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced, which is essentially a remaster of the beloved Assassin's Creed Black Flag. And it is using the latest iteration of the Unreal Next engine. That game came out in 2013. It was kind of like a cross-gen game between Xbox 360 and Xbox One and PS3 and PS4. And it's back. Exciting times, because this is one of the most beloved series entries. I mean, I'm always going to be bigging up Unity, but obviously this one was a lot more popular. Tom, what do you think about this one? Exciting times, I think. I mean, the concept of actually going back to this game and focusing on the single-player stuff, bringing the new engine features, reimagining I hate that word. Reimagining.
They've got to pick a something, don't they?
Actual new gameplay mechanics as well. I think that's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Lots to talk about here. What are your takeaways?
Yeah, almost too much stuff to kind of condense into one segment, I think. But the headline for me really is that it is as faithful as it possibly can be, while still trying to manage, to alter the gameplay in ways that fits the way we play Assassin's Creed today. By the looks of it, it still looks like it's using the combat system fundamentally of the original, which is key to enjoying Black Flag as we remember it. But they have made it more fluid. They've added story chunks, new story, new characters, and it just all round feels like they've committed way more to this than I'd expected going in. It's rebuilt on a new anvil. The newer anvil technologies, and it's great, but it still looks and feels like that old school Assassin's Creed experience. So there's a bit of a kind of disparity there, like between old and new, which I quite like to see, because I think people get nostalgic for that style where, the parkour had a very certain look to it, a certain rhythm as you moved about, the combat as well. From Origins onwards, it was all a bit more, slightly more Dark Souls inflected in terms of the layout of the controls and everything. But yeah, it's very interesting to see how far they've gone with the visual upgrades as well. Like just, there's top-down views of like the harbors that are completely reworked with like the lighting and shadows at range. I don't know if they'd hold up as they are like on a modern system, so they've gone in and redone all that. A lot of facial mocap as well has been redone. I just keep going on. It's incredible that they've committed so much resource to this, and it shows that they really, really care. And I think it's a special game as well because, I don't know, you remember when it came out, Rich, and we were kind of in that space where we were looking at the current gen games like the PS3 and 360, and we were thinking, yeah, that's the Black Flag. That's where Black Flag is. But we're really looking at Unity as like the benchmark of what's going to happen next,
Right.
and for this series, and because it was the new iteration of the Anvil engine. But Black Flag kind of came out with it settled on. It was safer in a lot of ways in terms of its tech, but it still blew everyone away because it really pushed for those ship battles.
Yeah.
It was like they launched with this trailer which blew, like, it was just astonishing, like the wave simulation, the weather effects while you were blasting these cannons across the seas. It was a kind of astounding just to see that, and then we knew Unity was coming. It was like, okay, well, it's gotta beat that. But yeah, it was really, it was definitely one of the more memorable Assassin's Creeds, which is saying a lot because there's been so many. It's just, and we've been there pretty much every year covering them.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we've seen remasters before, right? I mean,
Oh, gosh.
the whole Ezio
I was gonna
is
say that's junk. Like this is such a different scenario, Rich. Like Ezio Collection
absolutely.
is such a not good thing.
Yeah, I mean, it looks great, Alex, but there is obviously some ray tracing interest in this one.
Yeah, this appears to be using Anvil Next ray tracing. I presume it's also using their MPH system, their micropolygon geometry system. Although it's a little bit, that's a harder thing to see in a trailer. Well, even though there's a good amount of footage here, but it also has a lot of vegetation. And if I recall, the MPH system as of their last title didn't cover vegetation. So we'll see when the game comes here. But the PC spec requirements are out, and it's a little bit confusing. I at first thought that they were shipping a ray tracing only title, but then if you look at based upon the way they laid out the spec, where even the minimum specs says something like software ray tracing, but if you actually look at the bottom right, it says you can turn on baked lighting. So it's a little bit confusing that they wrote that.
We should assume it's going to be like Shadows, right?
I presume so, but game world size here, sparsity, as well as indoor locations, I presume the ray tracing here is going to look a lot better than the baked lighting. kind of like it did in many areas of Shadows. One thing that I did notice that is different in this title that Shadows had and this one doesn't have is the character hair. Appears to not be using their really cool hair strand-based system. Right. It looks like the character models look way better than the original, but I don't think they're using that here. Based upon everything I can see, it still is okay looking hair, but I don't think it's in use here. And I think that may be a consequence of the very long development time of this project. If I recall, we started hearing about this years ago, and it seemed like it would have maybe come out like at some point in the past, and then they pushed for higher quality on it at some point internally. And I think they have like all this character art they made, and remaking hair for a bunch of character models is probably a massive endeavor that would maybe not be worth it for the final product. So I don't think that's in here. Maybe I'm wrong, but it doesn't look like it is as of this. But I think the lighting looks way better than the original. The distance at which shadow maps render looks great. Everything looks better. Then they don't have that like PS3, Xbox 360 glint to every single surface. Everything's just like slathered in normal maps with terrible materials. This looks like something really high quality in comparison.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that there'll be a decent level of optimization similar to Shadows as well, because if we go back in time to Black Flag back in the day, it was one of the games that I just couldn't run at 60 frames per second on my system. It just wasn't possible for some reason. I just never quite got to grips with it. That was quite interesting, but not particularly satisfactory. Looking at that PC specifications chart, though, the standard ray tracing has got a little asterisk on it on minimum. Have we figured out what that means?
Yeah, it's in the bottom right, and it's this a weird thing that says like, oh, it uses software, and you can turn on baked lighting if you want instead. Right. The asterisk and the force, like the organization of this chart here, is a little bit stupid. I think I don't know who did it, but sorry, but like the bottom right, just like showcasing features here, that's like completely unintelligible, I think, to most people reading it. I didn't understand it. Yeah, it's doing it. Yeah, like you really have to think about it. So not that.
Well, I'd love to see a GTX 1660 running standard ray tracing. That would be quite the feat, wouldn't it?
I mean, it'd probably run terribly, to be honest with you. But those minimum specs also are pretty generous. I think that it probably runs a lot worse than you would think there, just CPU wise, because usually when you're in a bad CPUville, like the frame times are like, I think it's, the frame times are just the problem. It's like one of the problems you had so much trouble with the original game, Rich, because at the time CPUs were good, but they had pretty poor frame times in the Assassin's Creed games.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've come a long way with Assassin's Creed on PC, I think, because it never felt like a focus to me. But the last game was certainly, and in actual fact, I'm just thinking about when I revisited Unity for that video a few weeks back.
Oh yeah,
and the PC version was had LOD issues that the consoles didn't have even on ultra high, and it's like, what's going on here? It's not quite right. But yeah, that seems like a thing of the past now, and I'm looking forward to this. I think it's a game of its era that has looks like they've approached it correctly. They've brought in all the new tech that's going to make a difference. I think there's still a certain romanticism around this particular chapter that they've tapped into in the marketing. I think people are going to enjoy it. Do you have any sort of final thoughts on it, Tom?
Well, just good to get back to the sea shanties. I think that's the main thing. No, it's interesting. It is interesting as a not just for the tech, but also just about Ubisoft reevaluating the series as a whole. Because in they've announced that they're kind of dialing back. They had this kind of narrative across the whole Assassin's Creed series with the Desmond Miles, like the future stuff, where you'd be sent back in time to these various time periods.
I kind of like that. I like the present day stuff, but there was a point, I think it might have been Brotherhood, where I just kind of checked out on that particular storyline. It just seemed to get a bit weird.
And that's the problem. I think people just sort of got a bit tired of it. So in this, apparently, they're dialing that back and replacing that with more stuff within the Black Flag universe and world, which is good. I think it's the right move. But yeah, I'm very interested to cover this one when it comes out.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll get some access to Ubisoft as we had with Shadows to find out more, because there's clearly a lot going on here. And I'm quite excited to see how this is going to land. We don't have too long to wait either. So, yeah, good stuff. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so our next news topic, it's kind of like been an expanding topic across the week because there's been a lot of things happening in the Xbox space. And we actually have now something that is approaching a strategy, I think. But I guess we should go through them in turn. I guess it started, there was a story that there was going to be an end to custom silicon within Xbox. It is basically going to be effectively a refactoring of existing AMD parts. I don't think that's a particularly big deal. What we have had is confirmation from AMD and Microsoft that the bits that are needed for backwards compatibility with older Xbox games are obviously going to be baked into the silicon. So everything that's needed to run your old console games is in there. Everything going forward about the future of graphics technology is kind of like now going to be shared between the PC space and the console space. And I think that's going to be the same pretty much on PlayStation as well, perhaps with some minor modifications. We just need to see. But, you know, it is basically a unified direction of travel. So this concept of custom silicon, I think, Alex, I don't know what you think about this, but, you know, when we've got presentations from AMD that include Mark Cerny, the concept of the end of custom silicon, it's not really a big deal because it's actually now a collaboration between all parties to have, so everybody gets what they want.
Yeah,
do you agree with that?
I'd agree with that. I also say, like, especially since like the end of RDNA 3, a lot of the research side, AMD's been pushing actually really hard on the research side. And a lot of the stuff that they would be bringing into the architectures with, you know, they're going to get feedback from the vendors there and feedback from the people wanting things like an Xbox or PlayStation to be made, or, you know, the Steam box, which everyone forgot about. You know, they're going to bring that back. Did they? Valve forgot about it. You know, they're going to bring that stuff into the RDNA IP, and it's just going to carry over to every other product. You know, reading also into the PlayStation, I can't say it, PlayStation 6, based upon that video, it seems like the things that RDNA 5 will have are just like the stuff that they're going to use in PlayStation 6. That presentation to me for the Amethyst PlayStation 6 stuff didn't really seem like this is a PS6 exclusive technology thing. Rather, these are the things that RDNA will have in the future and PlayStation 6 will have as well. So I don't actually read this much like you in a negative way at all. I think the infrastructure and the amount of money it takes to make something very, very custom is not worth it, because being different than the norm, which is PC standards, is a bad idea because developers want to have a simple life, right? They don't want to be making just special stuff like the PS3 all the time. So I think this all makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think on the Sony side, there's still room for doing stuff like that customized compute unit for audio, the Tempest audio engine. You know, there's still room for stuff like that. It's just in terms of like graphics IP, graphics features, that sort of thing. You know, that's kind of like a unified approach now. Do you sort of lament potentially the end of exotic hardware though, Tom?
Yeah. That's where it's where a lot of us in the console space got kind of excited about every new console, you know, coming out. The fondest era for me really is like N64, PS1, Saturn, because there was just so much there, and it continued with PS3 and 360, obviously. But yeah, I have felt it's inevitable, the change in the turn in the tide with PS4 and Xbox One onwards. I think it's more about what people are willing to put, what developers are willing to put into the software side, and about optimizing the hardware for them, rather than offering up these wild features that maybe no one will ever use, or maybe will be useful for one or two games. Like, but yeah, it had to go this way to keep things budgets as light as they can possibly be in an industry where the budgets for most big AAA games are already kind of inflated, so it had to happen.
I guess on the Sony side as well, they'll be retaining their custom APIs and stuff like that. But from the hardware perspective, there's sort of a strong argument at this point for feature parity. But let's move on to some of the other discussion points. We were lamenting last week, Alex, the sort of direction of Games Pass. We had a sort of instant sort of reaction to that directly afterwards, which is that they are cutting the price of Game Pass Ultimate from, I think, $30 down to like 22, something like that, 23. They're going to remove Call of Duty as a day one part of Game Pass. So, in a sense, it's kind of like almost like an unwinding of some of the changes that were made in the wake of the ABK acquisition. And I think it's probably for the best, but, it just sort of highlights to me that that acquisition probably didn't turn out for the best. It didn't really make enough of an impact on Game Pass subscribers to actually make it worthwhile. And they're now sort of winding it back. They've reduced the price, but it's still not as cheap as it was prior to the increase to $30. So they've only wound it back so far. From a strategic point of view, I think it's probably the right call to sort of hive off Call of Duty just from a sustainability perspective, because it's, all of the indications are that the numbers weren't great there. I think going forward, though, the focus really needs to be on Call of Duty itself and getting the quality level up, because the last couple of entries haven't really been hugely sort of compelling, to the point where we didn't even cover the last Call of Duty, which is a first for a game of that size.
Yeah, for sure.
What do you make of that, though? I mean, it seems sensible, doesn't it? Right, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, you get what you pay for, but you're not always paying for what you want. And I think with Game Pass, a lot of people maybe didn't want to play Call of Duty, and yet were lumbered with this extra fee per month to get the Call of Duty game every day one. And I don't think that's really fair. It doesn't give people flexibility. And especially since that scaled down to the basic model for the Xbox passes, it was just like, okay. So all the tiers for Xbox Game Pass have kind of been reduced pretty much. I don't think it's all the way back to where it was, but it's close. And we're on the right path. But I do think, we see this sort of tone in a lot of Microsoft's Xbox announcements that this is our new future. This is where we're going to go, our bold new strategy. We're going to go here. And then 2 years later, they do something kind of contrary to that, and it's just kind of you need to pick kind of a line and stick to it. But it does sound, this is a good start, like stabilize Gen 9 as a healthy and high quality base.
What does that mean? Because I don't, I guess.
What does that mean?
What does it mean? Yeah. I mean, stabilize kind of suggests that it's unstable at the moment, which suggests there's issues with Gen 9, right? So what are the issues? Well, I guess the fact the console's like gigantically expensive is a bit of an issue, but what can they do about that? Is it about delivery of games? I'm not sure. That's we've got this strategy document, or rather a sort of statement that was shared. There's a lot in there that I think I don't quite understand. So there's a lot of sort of exec talk there, whereas I'd prefer they just say what they mean. Talk about expand, read. I don't even sort of get it. Something about the windowing of stuff, which I guess is possibly related to exclusivity and the time between a release on PC and a release and Xbox rather, and a release on PS5. Yeah, there's a lot going on there. A sort of just gratuitously inserted thing about a change in approach to AI. Well, I'm not even sure what their original approach to AI was, except that, what was it, Copilot for games, which I don't think anybody is particularly interested in. I don't know. There's a lot in there that's kind of a bit baffling, but I'm interested to see how it's actually going to translate into stuff that actually happens.
Yeah.
There was this report, actually, Oliver posted it in our DF Direct channel about a kind of customizable menu for Game Pass. Yeah, so Alex, last week we were talking about these tiers in Game Pass. We didn't sort of quite understand what it all means. And it looks as though they've kind of like decided, right, it's going to be less expensive. And they're also going to evolve it into a more flexible system. And Jez Corden from Windows Central claims that there's going to be potentially a pick your own plan formula for Game Pass, where you can basically pick what features you want. And maybe there'll be customized pricing there. I don't know. The whole sort of tier structure there has always been a bit baffling to me, because there's sort of like signature features of Game Pass that are only available if you really spend a lot of money. I guess the good thing with the pick your own plan is potentially that you could save money. But I guess the other thing about it is that it could highlight, there's the fear of missing out. So it could work the other way and people end up spending more. I'm not sure. What do you make of all of this, Alex?
Well, just to reference the Netflix model, which is perhaps the original internal pitch of Game Pass, is that you pay a certain amount of money each month and you get really big headline titles, but then Netflix uses that money to make smaller stuff and secure like licenses for like other IP and stuff like that, that enriches the entire model, like, and makes everyone happy. But then, the price of Netflix goes up, they take away stuff over time, and you get less happy. And I canceled my Netflix like years ago, I think, or maybe it was shortly before they got rid of TNG being on there. Like, there's no reason to use Netflix with no TNG, in my opinion.
Fair point.
And so here I see both a positive in that you're paying for stuff you don't care about. I didn't give a damn about half of the new Netflix stuff that was coming out. I thought it was just garbage. Maybe I didn't, maybe there's people who don't care about a lot of headline Game Pass titles, but like the indie portfolio it has. So you could do that. But at the same time, I'd be a little bit wondering and worried if they also use this like different customized tiers and plans to also support how they fund things that go into Game Pass. And over time, it could create like a lopsided thing where a lot of people are just subscribing to Game Pass for AAA maybe, and the amount of users who have like the indie tier or the indie selection is smaller, so they don't actually bring in a lot of indie titles to Game Pass over time because the economics stop working. So I could see this also becoming problematic over time, depending upon how the people who buy Game Pass decide to use it. But at the moment now, like you said, Rich, this is like a lot of exec corpo speak, super hard to parse. Fix the fundamentals for players and partners. They don't say we're not going to, sorry, Oliver, we're not going to unfuck Windows 11. They don't say that here, but that's what it should say maybe. Actually Windows 11, the interesting thing is here, there's not a lot of Windows talk in this. This is all about Xbox. And that's a bit
They've
weird.
even deprecated the Microsoft gaming brand in favor of Xbox, which I think is a positive move. It's the right move, certainly from sort of like a audience perspective, because there was the sense that sort of like the Microsoft mothership was encroaching more on the Xbox brand than was comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's actually changed, but certainly changing the brand is a step forward. This concept about exclusivity, it keeps coming up, but fundamentally, if we're going to be talking about it, the concept of exclusivity is basically it's not going to appear on PlayStation 5 for a set period of time. Yeah. And I think that's, fair enough in terms of like perception of what Xbox is doing. But the key thing is that in the grand scheme of things, the biggest competition for console gaming has always been PC, and Microsoft is a PC company, and those games are still going to appear on PC. All the audience research I've seen is that the younger audience, the teenage audience, are into mobile and PC, and gaming laptops are huge there. So in a sense, that I think there's from a holistic point of view, the concept of viewing PlayStation as some sort of threat to Xbox or competition to Xbox is kind of like archaic thinking at this point. Yeah, Microsoft are thinking bigger. They're thinking about getting their titles played on as many devices as possible by as many people as possible, and PC is a huge part of that. So I think that's almost kind of like window dressing. It's something that the core audience are clearly fascinated by and concerned about, but broadly speaking, It's not that much of a big deal, and I don't think the strategy there is really changing. I still don't really know what stabilizing Gen 9 means. Healthy and high quality base. There was talk about affordability as well, but at the same time, they've got a really expensive Series X, a super expensive Series S, bearing in mind its actual capabilities. Project Helix is going to have like a relatively huge APU for a console. So how's that going to be affordable? I mean, and the other stuff just seems like things that a gaming company should be doing anyway. Lead in comfortable, personal, high-performance accessories. I mean, that's what everybody should be aspiring to anyway. The content stuff, is there any... I mean, there is this talk of expanding into China, which is quite difficult owing to the restrictions the government imposes there. There's talk of mobile first, which kind of makes sense, bearing in mind what the younger audience, where they're playing. Maintain and grow in live games and long-term stewardship. I mean, that's your sort of forever games, right? Which, they've got a lot going on there. And they actually sort of talk about Minecraft, The Elder Scrolls, Sea of Thieves. Yeah, I mean, it's stuff about fixing the fundamentals for players and partners. What
does that mean?
Broken? Yeah. What is the strategy there? Curious. I guess it is still, we now have a sort of over sort of arching strategy. It's called We Are Xbox. But I'm sort of just waiting to see how this actually translates into actual actionable things that we're going to notice. And I guess that's all I've got to say about that at the moment. Any final thoughts, Tom?
only that it does seem internally, there's no real specifics in that document, but internally it's clear their messaging is, we need to redirect. We need to fix a bunch of things. We're not going to say specifically what they are, but we know we've got, and that enough is on its own kind of enough for me to say people within Microsoft right now and Xbox are trying to turn the boat, which is positive.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's a positive step forward. Some curious things in their We Are Xbox master plan there. Clarity is kindness.
Yeah, that's an interesting one.
I'd love to see some clarity beyond this document.
I'm imagining a bunch of motivational posters with cats on them, with all of these underneath them. Outwork the problem. And this cat hanging from a string. Protect our art, though, makes me happy. Because that's probably what they haven't done as well. I mean, they've been really good with their back catalog in comparison to Sony, but I still think they could have done it better in some areas, specifically regarding stuff like BC on PC and trying to really, really hard secure like the Activision Blizzard backlog and making it like very, playable across all systems. I think they still could have done better there. So I hope that is a positive thing for the future.
I would have liked to have seen an assurance to the staff that their jobs are a bit more secure, bearing in mind how many thousands of people they've let go. But that wasn't there.
No.
Man, there's a lot of stuff in here that I'm struggling to unpick. Signal over ceremony. Core before more.
Makers over managers. They just wanted more alliteration, didn't they?
That one makes sense, right?
Yes,
it's kind of like,
But they were just... they're kind of catchy. I don't know.
I'm sure that... Well, I hope this makes sense to the people that this memo was aimed at. That's all I'm saying.
Get a speed is learning... Like, it's like what speed? First of all, like the stuff you snort. Like, what is this about? Are they orcs? Like, what is this? It's a Warhammer reference for the nerds here. But like,
this is going radically off on a tangent. Let's see where Microsoft goes with this. But let's move on. Okay, so let's move on and talk about something else. Mouse PI. This was a game that released a couple of weeks ago. Really interesting concept here. It's essentially, I don't know what you would describe it as really, but if you could imagine a sort of first-person game in the style of like 30s animation, it's literally black and white, kind of like vibes of Cuphead to a certain extent there, but very, very different. Tom, you've been taking a look at this. It's a very, very unique presentation. I played it a little while just before we came on the direct here.
Yeah.
Very, very curious. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, it's. I will say it's developed by newcomer developer Fumi Games. They've gone for PS5, Xbox consoles, and Switch 2, and PC, obviously. I gave it kind of about 20 minutes on each platform. There's a lot of 2 modes on each as well, a quality and a performance. Yeah, very interesting. Like it reminds me, bizarrely enough, a lot of Paper Mario because they had all the spate of HD 2D RPGs that Square Enix is pushing out these days, where obviously it's 3D backgrounds, but then a 2D element sprite on top. But that sprite has actual 3D emitting properties, like it casts a shadow, even albeit a simple circle shadow. Ambient occlusion, it's a light source as well, so as it travels through the scene, it will, there's a broom essentially that you can summon to show you the way to the next point in the map. Yeah, this setup is simple. You're a mouse detective, and you're thrown into this 1930s inspired sort of world of kind of speakeasies and casinos and all these underground world. This underground world basically, and it's very much opens up with its pitch, I guess, in terms of the visual style. There's like several style modes. You can choose to basically up the film grain to make it look really old timey, and like the
Okay.
film grain is ramped up to the point that the frame is battered up, and you can also increase the there's a kind of a smear you can add, like a Vaseline-like smear. Diffusion is what it's called. Diffusion. That goes on top of the chromatic aberration. It makes it look really messed up. And then sound as well. You can make it sound as if you have it running on vinyl or a really beat-up old celluloid film reel, as if it's been archived. So very cool stuff, but it's always in black and white. No matter what you do, it's in that monochrome style. And so when you strip all that away, what you're left with is basically a shooter with very high quality sprites coming at you, with what they call it kind of rubber hose animation. Like it's the idea of squashing and stretching, and all the limbs not having points of articulation like we have elbows. They just have like round, bendy limbs that they can do. Noodles, yeah, noodles. Which is a great idea. Well, it's a great utilization of animation to take it to the furthest extreme and to show off what you can do with animation, and to show things like friction and preparing for a jump. You've got things like squash and stretch, so there's like weapons and health items will bend and flap as you pull them out, and as you pull the cork out of a whiskey bottle, the glass will stretch with it to show that tension. And it's all sold. They sell it really well in the sprites, and they're very committed to the bit, and it's a lot of fun. Enemies and characters appear as 2D elements, as I've said. They're kind of like it's funny just to kind of walk over them and see this like sprite just flip around, and but it's a very violent game as well. It's just surprisingly like you're blowing these the heads off these mice. They get decapitated, and there's blood everywhere. I'm like, okay, this is a real vibe mix-up. I wasn't quite expecting that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so that's the setup. It's a cool start. It's nice to see something non-conformative and just trying something completely unique. Yeah, as I say, there's 2 modes on every console, and they've been very transparent, the developers, in kind of laying out all their tech in a kind of their resolution and frame rate targets in a table, which I'll send to Oliver. Everything you see in that is exactly as you is true of what you end up getting. The kind of noteworthy points are that PS5 and Series X and S all get 120 FPS modes if you have the right display attached, if you're using that performance mode. But the Switch 2 version kind of peaks at 60, and that's kind of enough of that. But yes, it's the resolution part of it doesn't go into the fact it is dynamic. There's a lot of dynamic switching. So on Switch 2, they say the performance mode while docked is 1080p, but it's kind of 900p to 1080p. The quality mode on Switch 2 while docked is 1440p, but it drops to 1080p, so 1080p to 1440p there. PS5's quality mode is 1800p to 4K, so there's some flex there, and hitting 60 FPS. And the 120 FPS performance mode on PS5 is 1296p to 1600p. So it's quite a lot of numbers there. But yeah, TLDR, there's a flexibility to the numbers they're saying, and they'll go below that. And I think you found this too, Rich, that the resolution numbers are one thing, but the image quality is kind of another. And it's kind of, the anti-aliasing is there, but it's not doing the visual style any justice, because it's a great style, but I don't remember seeing 30s cartoons with jagged stair steps and shimmering, and it kind of it ruins the aesthetic just to not have a better implementation in there.
Yeah. I played it this morning, and I did it on PS5 Pro, right? I don't think there's specific Pro support. It just cleans up what's happening on PlayStation 5.
Yeah.
And initially I thought, right, okay, I'm going to go into performance mode. And the image quality I thought wasn't great. You can see like there's some real issues, particularly with like specular aliasing and stuff like that.
Big time.
The resolution looks quite low. Obviously I've got like a 48-inch OLED like literally right in front of me here, but that would have been visible at living room distances easily. Also, when you're really close to the sprites, they seemed a bit blocky, and that was a bit off-putting. But when I switched to quality mode, everything just looked a lot better. I mean, those same issues are there; they're just mitigated, and I think that's definitely the way I'd prefer to play the game on a PS5 console. It's kind of just interesting that you are seeing sort of big aliasing issues like that in the modern era. But you pointed out, Alex, that those sprites are probably be incompatible with anything else.
Yeah, TAA famously is pretty bad with sprites, transparencies. They don't have motion vectors usually, and to the same degree, especially if they're like Tom said, they're moving with the camera. Like John, you could see them flipping around and stuff. So that would be even more problematic. And I imagine that's one of the reasons why they wouldn't do it, because it would make everyone smeary and it would ruin the aesthetic. But at the same time, I'm thinking of ways that could have mitigated it or made it better would be to super sample the game. So you'd actually have it run. Right. You'd actually have it run at a lower resolution, something like 480p. Like seriously, if we're going for that aesthetic, and then just have it be downsampled from the higher res that it actually is. And that could be one way to do it. I'm a little bit surprised that you said, Rich, that the game even has any specularity at all. So that's kind of another...
It's just the contrast, I think, in terms of bright color, bright edges in particular, and stuff like that.
I know what you mean.
The contrast is really, really quite striking.
Yeah, like right at the start, you walk out and there's a table with all these bright white plates on it, and you can immediately just see the stair stepping all over those. That's my first impression.
I thought going back to Cuphead in particular, that was one of the things about that game, is just that there was no aliasing issue because everything was hand drawn.
Yeah,
it didn't matter if you were running at 720p or 1080p on PC; it essentially looked the same because it was all hand drawn art. But I guess this is different because it is combining 2D and 3D elements necessarily. So for the concept,
I suppose MSAA or something like that would have done a job on that. Like, it reminds me a bit of Doom in this way as well. It's like,
I think it's a bit of a boomer shooter, to use the phrase that people really like or don't like. Some people don't like it. I find it amazing. Even though it should be Gen X shooter, that's like the best part. It should be a Gen X shooter, but it's boomer shooter.
A few bits to talk on about performance, and I'll wrap this up. But it is not a perfectly optimal game by any means. The PS5, like the quality mode is, running at 4K on base PS5, and it's like 40 to 60 FPS. There's bits like the casino with a giant like roulette table in the middle. There's the streets and a subway area with all these characters loitering on the pathway, and it's just not there. 4K is a stretch too far. The 120 hertz mode gets you kind of unlocks that completely and runs at a lower resolution. But even then, it's like mid 70s with drops into the 60s as well. So yeah, that'll probably do fine with VR. It's that'll absolutely fix work, but it's not an ideal situation. And the best way to go about that is to run the game at 60 hertz and use the performance mode, which just will cap at 60, and then you've kind of got your fluid frame rate without any drops. PS5 Pro solves pretty much all of that. I'd say the quality mode now runs at 60 flat from pretty much all the testing in the same areas, and the 120 hertz performance mode kind of gets there. It's like 100 to 120, so it's pretty good, and it does it's a significant uplift in performance over what we had on base console, and anything beyond that will be cleared up by VR. I did try Switch 2. Obviously, the aliasing is significantly worse there. It's just 900p to 1080p, and maybe will be lower in the handheld state as well. But I tried it in docked mode, and the 60 FPS mode, the performance mode, is more like 40 to 60, and it's just it's not quite.
Not great.
Not there. And the solution there is running at 30 in the quality mode, which seems to hold really well. Like, it's a really solid capped experience so far. And I imagine that's the nature of the beast, I guess. But it's 30 FPS experience seems to like the best way to go on Switch 2. I did give Series S a very quick go before I jumped on this Direct, just to see what was going on there, because it's always curious to see, because it's a bit more unique. As a spec, and it was running pretty much at 40 to 60 on that performance mode. In the quality mode. So the performance mode does clear that up quite well on Series S. But yeah, it's an interesting game. Switch 2 drops a few settings as well, worth noting. The texture quality is dropped, like on the very first lift door, which opens like this way, sliding. The textures are dropped in quality, missing some fog effects while you're out in the streets, which is a shame, because it's a very nice sort of noir-ish a thing to add. And I've noticed the dead mouse enemies also just disappear much faster from the ground once you've downed them, which is a bit of a shame. And finally, the ambient occlusion on Switch 2 is like significantly downgraded, so it looks almost like crisscross sketch patterns where there should be any shading, which actually looks all right given the kind of cartoony look of the game. So, but yeah, I'm out of breath now. So that's everything.
Like me, like last week. This is actually kind of a funny thing. Thinking about this game, I believe it may be a Unity title, or it's using a modern engine basically to give it portability. Yeah, but it's one of those instances where it makes you wish that something like Z-Doom or GZ-Doom was actually portable. It's just not for licensing reasons, but it would chew through this. It would run like at 1 billion FPS at 4K on almost anything. So, it just gives you a sense like the costs sometimes that you have to incur to make a game actually portable to multiple platforms is just the base here is Unity, right? And that is a much higher base than the Doom engine, which could maybe have run this game with some scripting. I don't know.
Now that I would have loved to have seen. That would be a great
something
mod.
I would love to see, and it does exist, but I've not had a chance to see it yet, is there is actually a PSP port of Cuphead.
What?
Oh, that's sick. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I'd love to see it. I mean, in theory, if it is mostly sprite work, it's kind of doable. The memory implications, though, are probably quite troubling. Bearing in mind it's like built for much, much more modern hardware. But yeah, I'm kind of curious about that. There are videos on YouTube there.
Wow.
Anyway, let's move on. Final news story of the week, and it's a good one. There's rumors emerging, credible rumors, I would say, that Intel is planning to follow up on the release of its Panther Lake processors, the laptop processors, with specific handheld versions, or maybe just taking those existing processors and shrinking them down into handheld form factors. It does look as though you're going to get like the full GPU architecture that was there in the full Panther Lake chip, which is great. And it looks like there's going to be two variants, one with 10 Xe3 cores, one with 12 Xe3 cores. And it does look as though it is pretty much the full Panther Lake configuration there, 2 performance CPU cores, 8 efficiency cores, and the four low power cores there. So it's, this is going to be pretty hardcore for a handheld. And I think the thing that excites me the most about this, or leaves me with a lot of anticipation, is that it's going to have a 25 watt base TDP. There's potentially the notion that you can go up to 65 watts or 80 watts on the more extreme version of the chip, the one that's got the full 12 Xe3 cores. The laptops that I've got, and I think you've got one as well, Alex, it seems to top out mostly at like 30 watts. And if we go back to the coverage I looked at in the past, when I looked at this in the past, you could actually play Alan Wake 2 with Series S resolution, but PS5 quality settings, and it would outperform the Series S there. So there's a serious amount of horsepower in Panther Lake there, bearing in mind it is an integrated GPU. And of course, you're getting all of the Intel feature set. So you're going to get like XeSS, for example. You'll have the frame generation, the multi-frame generation that they're doing there. So it looks like there's going to be announcements at Computex. I wouldn't be surprised if the collaboration with MSI continues. Obviously, they've done the Claw handheld. I'd expect to see a new Claw. I mean, I've got no actual insider knowledge here. It just seems logical, right? But there may well be other partners as well, since it does seem to be the rumors do seem to be talking about more than one product. Alex, exciting times, right? I mean, proper competition to AMD in the PC handheld space is something that we've been kind of wanting for a while now, right?
Yeah, and with a forward-looking GPU architecture, which is what we're missing from AMD most, for most things. I think the CPU side is in an okay place, but it's really that GPU that we really just want something that is more capable and more flexible and offers you a road to the future for supporting things like machine learning and frame generation that is higher quality. The one thing that I also want to talk about here that I think is good about them is the 4 low power core that they actually have, because one thing that you have to kind of manually set up if you have a Steam Deck, I think, really is like, let's say you're playing an old 2D game or an emulator, like a Game Boy emulator or something like that. It will, clock down, but it won't necessarily clock down everything super hardcore like you'd really want. And you sometimes have to like manual profile it to get it really hard and put everything down to just run it like a Game Boy game.
Which is tedious.
Extra work, just to get more battery life, because that's why you want it. You want more battery life. Here, I think the balancing that will be available, at least within Windows, we'll see about Linux support in the future, will be that these 4 LP cores are going to be the thing. Everything else is going to turn off, and you're just going to get these LP cores here running the smaller, less ambitious content. And I think that could be a really great setup for playing lower end, older games at like 60 to 120 hertz, depending on what they are, but with great battery life. So I think that could be a little like dark horse kind of performance feature there that hopefully should be testable in the final product. It's just running like a Steam Deck, let's say, over here with a really low power game versus this with a very low power game, and just seeing how they turn out in the end. I think that'd be at the same well, it wouldn't be same wattage at that point, because it'd be very low wattage. I don't know. But I'm just curious to see what that actually has for the final product, because that's one thing that I really liked about the new architecture, or at least the extension of it, because this is actually a previous thing they've done in the past, but just that it's even better now that they can turn off the rest of the chip and just have these LP cores running.
Yeah, absolutely. Tom, any thoughts?
Yeah, gosh, the scalability power-wise is incredible. Our colleague Will Judd, his article on this, which I'm looking at now, is like saying it puts it along similar lines to AMD's Strix Halo, in terms of the power
Yeah,
wattage.
yeah.
And it's like 80 watts on the Arc 3 G3 Extreme is kind of absurd, isn't it? Is that a power direct to the mains situation? Can't be off the battery, right?
It's got to be, yeah. I mean, you could in theory do 80 watts, but you've got other things on top of that. I don't think the memory is included in that.
Oh, okay.
The screen won't be. The SSD won't be, the motherboard. Yeah, so there's going to be additional power on top of that. But I do think that the way things worked versus Strix Halo, which is a very different product, is that Strix Halo kind of thrives at, 80 watts, sort of 60 to 80 watts is its kind of sweet spot because it's a massive slab of silicon. The GPU here is not as potent, but actually the less power you give it, the better it sort of retains its proportionate performance. So it actually is, in some of the benchmarks I've seen, so for example, the Forks, the lower the wattage goes, the more of the performance it retains versus Strix Halo, which loses a lot more performance when you go down beneath the sweet spot. And it's kind of what you want for a handheld. I mean, I love my GPD Win 5 with Strix Halo in it. It's capable of doing some like crazy things. You are literally playing Alan Wake as you would play it on a PlayStation 5 in a handheld, and it looks really, really cool. But do you really want to be using a handheld that's like drawing 50, 60 watts to get that experience when you've got potentially more efficient silicon that has got stuff like proper machine learning based upscaling that Strix Halo doesn't have? So I'm looking forward to it. I mean, we've had a taste because when I did get the laptop through from Intel with Panther Lake in it, I was kind of surprised that it was power limited compared to the stuff that you saw, Alex, at CES,
Right.
which I think was like 80 watts or 65 watts, something like that,
65,
in that sort of window. Yeah. So that was quite interesting. It's like, okay, they're already limiting it on laptops, but it didn't seem to matter that much. You still got a great experience. So I expect that to sort of persist into the handhelds. And I guess the other stuff is kind of like, you start moving into wish list territory. You want a VRR screen really on a handheld, PC handheld especially. It really does make a difference. It papers over a lot of the cracks because you are still ultimately dealing with a device that's running at, extremely low power. A Series S is still pulling like 80 watts without a screen.
Yeah.
So doing this at 30, maybe up to sort of 40 to 50, it's still a bit of a push. So you do want stuff like VRR. I hope one of these devices has an OLED VRR display. The Legion Go 2, I believe, that device which ramped up to like $1,500, $2,000 for some reason, that had it. But there are other devices that are coming with that screen. I really hope one of those Panther Lake laptops gets that screen because it's kind of like, kind of what you want, isn't it? I don't imagine this stuff's going to be cheap because of the current memory crisis and the SSD crisis and the fact that Panther Lake itself is a pretty advanced chip, right? It's not going to be, something that they can sort of produce in volume at massively discounted prices. But, there seems to be this sort of real push for handheld gaming in the PC space. Steam Deck kind of kicked off that particular movement. It's been pretty cool to see it sort of evolve over the years. But the one thing that has been lacking has been competition. And yet here it is. And I'm really looking forward to it. Any final thoughts, Alex, before we wrap up?
Nada.
Fair enough.
Yeah, direct to the point.
Nada, that's it. Okay, that was the final news topic, therefore the end of the show. So please do like, subscribe, share if you enjoyed it. Ring bells for notifications for you, potential algorithmic boosts for us. DF supporter program, patreon.com/Digital Foundry. Early access to each and every DF Direct. Updates on the team, completely ad-free website, all good stuff, amazing community as well. It's the place to be if you like what we do. But that's all from us on this one. I guess we'll see you next week. But in the meantime, thanks for watching and supporting Digital Foundry.